and the ocean-wide flower garland assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Wu shang shen shen wei miao fa, bai qian wan jie nan sao yu, wo jin jian wan de shou chi, jie ru lai zhen shi yi. Can you do it with me together? The unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma in hundreds of thousands, millions of eons, come on, you can do it, is difficult to encounter. Now that I've come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom the thus come one's true and actual meaning. Very good. 师父上人，各位师兄，大家阿弥陀佛。That's the signal for everybody to come flooding back in the room. Please grab a seat as soon as you can, because we'll wait until you're sitting peacefully and quietly before we start. 请各位尽量快点进来坐下。我们等大家坐好了，我们就继续开始。We're going to do something a little different tonight than usual, which is because there are lots of young people, maybe, or young in spirit, people who are new to this practice of reciting Guanyin's name. Doug Powers and some of the monks and nuns also have a class over at the university building. It's for people to kind of get their feet on the ground, to kind of get oriented to Guanyin recitation, to the method of this Dharma assembly. And I suggested that tonight, this is ordinarily the time when we explain the Avatamsaka Sutra, but we can do that and talk about Guanyin's basic dharmas. So that's what I had in mind tonight, was two parts. One is going to talk a little bit about the sutra and Guanyin Bodhisattva in the sutra, but also I'm going to come down and respond to any questions that people might have, so that together we can look into Guanyin Bodhisattva's teaching. So those of you who are in the introductory class, please get your questions ready, and we'll look into it together, okay? Because this is really, among all the various stories in the Mahayana tradition, Guanyin Bodhisattva's dharmas are some of the most approachable, the most heartwarming, and the most immediately efficacious. They work quickest, this fast-acting dharma. So I'm really always delighted to be able to share it. 我说今天晚上有点特别的这个方式，就是说先照常要讲这个《华严经》的一些道理，就是对于观音菩萨的道理也可以讲。二来呢，我就等一下我就下来了，跟大家答复一些问题了。所以各位如果有对于观音菩萨修行的问题呢，我们就你们要准备啊。I noticed the monks are kind of leaving lots and lots of empty seats. Could the monks come forward? Because everybody behind just crowded right up there. 那个出家众呢，尽量往前边，不要留太多空位。And if people want to get in front of the camera is not a natural boundary, right? How about the guys in the Haiqing right now? Can you come forward so that, because everybody behind you is like already full. Now, please don't be shy about moving forward so that everybody gets seats. Also, the women's side is lots of empty seats. I don't know if there are rules about that, but don't feel you all have to scrunch together on this side here. Ah, much, much, much better. Yeah. Shifu was really strong about not sitting alone in an aisle that nobody else wants to climb over you to sit in front of you. So, all right, that's excellent. Yeah. Good indeed, good indeed. Shanzai, Shanzai. And while people are up, before we started, would somebody be kind enough to pass out the yellow ceremony books? And if it's one for two people, that would be okay. We need the yellow books. We're going to look at a praise of Guanyin. 麻烦大家就无论就谁在方便的话，把那个黄色的可颂本就流通，或者2个人1本都可以。总而言之，我们都要看那个观音赞。等一下我就下来跟大家解释。We're also going to be webcasting tonight. So if you ask a question, you too can be a star. Dharma Realm Live on the YouTube channel. Star of the Buddha Hall. That doesn't sound right, does it? Not clear on the concept. All right, could we put our palms together, please? Now, I have the English. I'm going to reconstruct the Chinese of the Huayan Jing. So I'll give you a line and you repeat it back to me. This is the translation of a section of the Huayan Jing on Guanyin Pusa. 这个华严经对于观世音菩萨，就我有英文的那个译本，中文的我要用白话文，所以呢，请各位合掌。And she once again made a vow. May all living beings who are mindful of me or who say my name or who see my person, may they completely leave all fears behind. Good man / good woman. All right. I don't mean good men should / good women. That didn't sound right. Good man, you use the pronoun that you like. Good man, good woman. All right. So, good man. After I use this expedient means to allow all living beings to leave their fears behind, I further teach them to make the resolve for anuttara, samyak sambodhi, and to never retreat from it. Okay, there it is. That's the Avatamsaka Sutra. Those are Guanyin Bodhisattva's words. Let me, we won't do the recitation in Chinese because I don't know the exact text, but I'll translate it from English back into Chinese. 这是华严经的经文，就是从那个入法界品哈。就是所谓善财童子会啊，善财观音菩萨会，善财童子遇着观音菩萨那个地方，就说他又发愿说，愿一切众生，依念于我，称念我的名号，或者见到我本身，愿一切众生完全离开一切恐怖。善男子、善女人，我用这个方便法，就会令一切众生离开一切怖畏之后，我又教他们如何发阿耨多罗三藐三菩提心，而永远不退转。应该大概这样子哈。All right. So here we are in the Hall of 10,000 Buddhas at the city of 10,000 Buddhas. This is Sunday night. This is when we ordinarily open up the Avatamsaka Sutra and explain it line by line by line. And we've come a long way in the text to a chapter called the 10 Transferences. We're on transference number 6. And we go very slowly, but the idea is to make sense of it and to put ourselves into it as best we can. That's the idea. And the sutra lets you do that. It's kind of like a door, or better yet, you could say it's like a mirror. And you can imagine your face there in the person of the Bodhisattva. And if anybody had to ask, what's the Avatamsaka Sutra about? And if you said it's about bodhisattvas, awakened beings, you'd be right. You wouldn't be off. So among those living beings, among those awakened beings that the sutra talks about is the one standing directly in front of all of you. The one right over my left shoulder, which is Guanyin Bodhisattva, Guan Shi Yin. And here, Guanyin Bodhisattva is our main image. This is the primary Buddha image. Not a Buddha, interestingly, but a Bodhisattva. And it's a particular image of that Bodhisattva with those 1,000 hands and eyes. And in front, 42 particular hands and arms holding 42 particular, what are called Dharma instruments, Dharma implements, fa qi. And each hand has an eye in the palm, if you get close. Further, this image has 11 heads. Quite dramatic and maybe startling image of this bodhisattva if you're not used to seeing one like this. And very distinctive. After you see this Guanyin Bodhisattva image, it's hard to forget it. You know, it's so unlike almost anything else of sacred images that you can imagine. And if you take a close look at the heads, you'll see each one is different. Some are scary, just outright scary. They're meant to be frightening because it's Guanyin Bodhisattva's hands, eyes, Dharma implements, and heads are there to represent all the different states of mind that you can have. Not just me sitting right here, but me when I'm enlightened, when I'm awake, when my wisdom is complete, when my compassion is working. All the states that could come out of my nature, you'll find them represented here. And further, all those interesting implements that she's holding, like bells, mirrors, lotus flowers, swords, halberds, books, more flowers, all the different wonderful things that she's holding are manifestations, that is to say, appearances of ways that Guanyin helps people. So the implements are compassion represented. The hands, eyes, and heads are wisdom manifested. All the different aspects of your mind, when it's purified, of mostly selfishness. So when you interpret that image that way, what have I done? I've interpreted it in a psychological way, right? Using it to represent inner states that are not apart from me and you, but they're expressed through cultivation, through, we heard Ajahn Sumedho talk about Dhamma, the way of reality, the way of practice, when you do things from the Buddha's and the Bodhisattva's point of view. This is how it looks when it's done right, when it's done well. So when you see it that way, oh, that's different. That's a little more approachable than to say, gee, that looks foreign. Gee, that looks Asian. Gee, that looks far away. Gee, that looks scary. You know, whatever response you might have. I know I had those thoughts when I first saw a 1,000-hand image. That's, you know, Jesus doesn't look like that on the cross, you know. And I've never seen God look like that, but I kind of like it. And I was definitely intrigued by it. What in the world could that be? Now I want to tell you a story about how I approached it and got a little closer to that image. 我就说，刚刚念的是《华严经》上的这个上财童子遗照观世音菩萨。等一下。One thing that we do, and I know all of you folks who are here for the beginning explanation of Guanyin Bodhisattva, that class is going to be in English, but here in the city of 10,000 Buddhas, Master Hua always made it important for us to be multicultural, bicultural, megacultural, so more than one, because the Buddha Dharma did not start in the U.S. And further, guess what? It didn't start in China either. It didn't start in Vietnam either. The Buddha Dharma started in India, or more precisely, it started in the awakened mind of a person who happened to be Indian. So when it gets to us here in the West, it's gone through all these different language groups, all these different cultures, all these different food bases. You know, it's jumped from rice eating now to potatoes and corn eating. So, and bread eating. So how's that going to work? It's jumped continents and peoples. So in that process, it has gone through lots of translations. So we're the kind of the first and second generation of the Chinese Mahayana here in the West. So it's important, as they say, yin shui si yan. When you drink water, you recall with gratitude where it came from. So we want to recall our Chinese roots, and that's why we translate from whatever language we start in to the other language. Sometimes we have Vietnamese going in here, other times Cantonese going in here, so multiple languages, which is really the Dao Feng. That's the way the wind blows here at the city, the wind of the way. 好了，我就说，各位，那么眼前都有一尊菩萨，这尊菩萨呢是观世音菩萨。如果你是老修行呢，那你很熟悉了。不过呢，你会不会记得你第一次看到这个千手千眼观世音菩萨像，是不是比较比较特别啊？尤其呢，有1000只手，每一只手心都有一个眼睛，一只眼睛，还有42个手，每一个手上都有法器，对不对？那么还有什么呢？12个头，这个头都不同了，有的很慈祥，有的很恐怖，真的就是应该怕的这样子表情啊，好像很会吃人啊，一点都不慈悲。什么道理？为什么？你有没有问自己？有没有考虑为什么这样子？那如果是老修行就说本来就是这样子，没有什么可问的啊，那不一定的。我都记得我自己呢，第一次看到这么一个像呢，我甚至于不敢开口，不敢抬头，不敢张开眼睛了，因为太新鲜了啊。那个基督教、天主教没有像那样子的，没有了。所以呢，慢慢的，我就听师父解释，他用什么方法来解释呢？他就用心理学。他就用一些 psychological 这些观念来解释，好比说，观音菩萨曾经是佛，那佛是什么呢？佛是大慈悲、大智慧，是不是？也是福慧双满，没错。不过呢，我们就说这个二眼，所谓二眼就是智慧和慈悲。那个智慧呢，就是那么多手，那么多法器。那么多头很大智慧可是呢，慈悲都是这些手，1000个手1000个耳朵，42个法器。为什么呢？谁念他的圣号，都会有求必应就是一定会有感应道交了，那是大慈悲的感应所以。有的是好像一面镜子，有的就是一些反应听到人的叫声，就伸出一只手来救济众生。所以智慧和慈悲都在那儿表现出来了。那你用这个方法来看看，原来如此，那我比较可以了解OK， 那我有个故事就解释我怎么样接近观音菩萨。Okay, my story. How was that? Did you all follow that Chinese? Yeah, even though it's got an English accent, yeah, it's kind of like an American Chinese. Well, you know, let's all study it together, and you can correct my accent, I hope. Counting on you. Okay, here's the story. How did I get to appreciate what this is? Back in Toledo, where I grew up, every year we had something called the gun show. What was the gun show? It was a gun show, showing guns. You bet. It was a big deal. And I was a kid who grew up in the age of TV westerns. I don't know if Westerns are popular anymore, but when I was growing up, when I was really impressionable, you know, like from age 6, 7, 8, 9 up to 13, 14, 15, Westerns were really big. Lawman, Gunsmoke, Have Gun Will Travel, Citizen Soldier, Sugarfoot, Maverick, Bronco Lane, right? All these, we used to watch every one of them. They all involved shooting people, right? The sheriff shot the bad guys, and the bad guys robbed the bank, and then the sheriff, you know, chased them, and then the cowboys shot the Indians shot the cowboys, on, and the soldiers shot the soldiers. At that point, we didn't have so many, you know, like Miami, what, CSI, whatever it is now. I didn't watch the crime as much. It was cowboys, mostly. But guns were big. And so every year, the gun show came to Toledo, and my dad would take us. I remember I was 10 years old in particular. And as a 10-year-old, what does a 10-year-old want? A 10-year-old wants to know, what is strength? What's strong? Because you're just coming into your body, and you don't know what's strong. And so you push until you can't push it over, and that's your measure. That's how you've grown. That's who you are. If you can't push it over, if you reach a limit, then it's okay. You grow, right? So I really worship strength. And guns were strong. You didn't have to have any training or discipline or speed. You just had to pull the trigger, and boom, you had the power of life and death. Oh, kids got it, right? So there we were at the gun show at the Toledo Armory. And I remember walking in there and being amazed, because why? There were guns there from the entire history of weapons. There were, and I'm going to have to read this because I got the whole list. There were all the killing tools of human history. There was a full set of knight's armor from King Arthur. There were lances, shields, Viking axes. There were Apache bows and arrows, samurai swords, pygmy blowguns, right? There were cavalry sabers, Gurkha lances, ninja daggers, dueling swords, throwing knives, pirate cutlasses, deer rifles, a Gatling gun, an M16, hand grenades, landmines, bazookas, mortars, artillery cannons, and a decommissioned atomic bomb. That was the gun show. Seriously. And there were table after table after table of dealers who brought their weapons to sell. And the people who walked around to see what was for sale, right? So, as an adolescent, even a pre-adolescent, I was so excited to see all these incredible shows of strength externalized, right? Totally outside. And I was a typical kid of the 60s, and I had been desensitized to the true impact of these killing weapons. We were at that time watching the movies sent back from Vietnam and watching napalm burn babies, watching helicopters get shot out of the sky, and that was the early days of Vietnam. I grew up later and had another whole relationship with it, but at this point it was just images on the screen, and I didn't connect the weapons in front of me to their purpose, to the idea that these were meant to destroy human bodies. So I remember standing there in the armory, and I lifted up a samurai sword. And oh, the samurai sword, I could feel the intent of that fashioned, hammered, folded, smelted steel edge. I remember I felt a raw reaction in my body of the power that I had along that blade, going out to a point. And I remember looking down the blade of the samurai sword, and I watched my eyes narrow suddenly I was seeing myself as a wielder of the sword. Just all that it took in a blink. Suddenly, the sword and I were one purpose. And I looked for someone to use it on in my imagination, right? So there was a man standing beside me, and he had a Civil War musket, the kind that is a mini ball musket. You bite the paper cartridge and dump the ball and the powder, and you take a ramrod and you tamp it down and you hold on to the ramrod and bring it up and shoot. And this man standing beside me had picked it up, and he was looking down the sight and focusing and pretending to shoot at my father, who was standing beside me on the other side of the table. And I remember that as I saw this man aiming at my father, I saw the whole movie in front of me. I tightened my grip on my samurai sword, and I realized that here was the enemy in front of me, and I was ready to go to war. In the turning of a thought, with that weapon in my hand. And I didn't understand it. I was 10 years old, but I was ready to defend my dad with that weapon, just like that. I went from young man oohing and eyeing over all this military power to a combatant ready to kill, to defend against a threat. And the only thing that was different was a turning in my mind, a single thought. And I thought, I remember putting the guy, what happened, I'll drop the other shoe. What happened is my dad looked up and saw the guy aiming the gun, and he said, "Hey, Ted, how you doing? Oh, you're late. I thought you were going to meet you in the parking lot." It was my father's friend, and they laughed and laughed, and they're, talking about the weapon. And I was standing there with this sword, feeling very foolish, because why? Enemy had become friend right away. And it was like, oh, and I was going to kill my dad's friend. Why? Right? And I was a kid, but I remember tracing these thoughts, just back and forth and back, and suddenly I kind of lost my interest in the weapons. It was so sudden. So back home I saw this cycle, and after I began to meditate, it took me a long time to digest this. And I realized that once I got to Gold Mountain Monastery, I ran into a talk by Shifu, and reading the talk, this entire experience at the gun show came back to mind. And the talk was about cycles of weapons through the elements. And here's how it went. It goes, once upon a time, weapons were weapons of earth. And of course, this is one of them. And my foot, your foot, is another one. Earth, right? We recycle, we recompost our bodies back to earth. Whoever had the fastest foot or the heaviest fist won the contest. But at a certain point, some smart engineer said, oh, you know what? He said, weapons of earth are good, and we can train to be powerful warriors, but if I take a stick, it extends my reach by how long the stick is, and no matter how fast your foot is, if I have a club in my hand, I can knock you down. Because I can hit you before your foot reaches me. I got a bigger stick. And so the cycle of weapons technology advanced by one element, right? Wood digs earth. Right? 就是木克土. All right? And so that lasted for a while, and clubs became the weapon of choice. And then somebody said, you know what? I've got some flint that's really sharp and really hard, and I rub it on this rock over here, and it gets to a point, and if I wrap it onto this piece of thin wood and put some feathers on the end, I can stand 20 feet away and shoot the guy with a club. No matter how big or how fast his club is, he's dead before he can get anywhere near me. And weapons of metal were invented. Okay, and we went from tipped arrows to swords to knives and halberds, all the different advent of metal weapons technology, and the cycle of violence took one more turn, right? This is all an essay that Shifu wrote. You get the idea, right? And so, sure enough, what do they say? Jin ke mu, right? Metal cuts wood. So there's 5 elements. Then you can see how it works, right? Somebody invented what? Fire. And with fire added to weapons, suddenly you had gunpowder. And somebody able to shoot a metal fire weapon, shoot a bullet, could kill any archer in the world, right? Bows and arrows versus guns, the bows always lose. So again, bombs and bullets, the cycle of violence turned one more time. And 火克金, right? Fire cuts metal. It melts it. All right. So you think, wow, well, that's pretty much the end of it, one would hope. Until, as Shifu wrote in his essay, till we get to the present time, when we have chemical weapons. Chemical weapons, which are so fearsome they're banned. When Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons on the Iranians, it's remembered to this day as one of the darkest moments, right? And the gas attacks in World War I, they were banned after that. And recently in Syria, they were used. So what is a chemical weapon? Water, right? So weapons of water cut weapons of fire, and that circle of violence turns again. And as Shifu wrote this essay, I was seeing this in the context of the weapons show, the gun show at the Toledo Armory. And that was just a snapshot. What I was seeing in the gun show was simply the evolution of weapons technology and the inside of the human mind before cultivation. If we don't cultivate, then all these weapons have the same purpose, which is destroying human life. Is that what we're about? Well, yeah, because we do it a lot. So much of our budget, so much of my tax dollar, if I pay taxes, goes to exactly creating the means to destroy human life. What about that? But the story's not done. There's one more. Cycles have this way of turning, right? So what douses weapons of water? If you understand the 5 elements, that would be, Kevin, you know what it is? Where do we start? We started with earth. We went earth. Okay, so wood cuts earth, shovels dig it. Metal cuts wood, axes cut the tree. Fire melts metal, so anything is put in the fire, it'll melt. But water douses fire. What absorbs water? Earth. Right. So how do we transform weapons technology? Bring it back to the human, but disarm the mind. Disarm the mind. And that was my experience in the gun show, watching this enemy who was going to shoot my dad, even though he didn't have a bullet in the gun. I knew that. But my reaction to seeing somebody line a rifle at my father's head was to want to cut his head off. He was the enemy suddenly. And then when it was my dad's buddy, suddenly I realized that I had to disarm my own mind. And then we find the cycle of violence. If humanity can simply refuse to fight and say, this is not what we're here to do. We're the only species on the planet, well, anthropologists or zoologists will tell you different, piranha fish, etc. But we're the only ones that sustain war or talk about genocide, wiping out the other species. Animals don't behave that way. So, how interesting, right? Now, I haven't translated in a long time, but if we stop with the weapons of water, oxygen, hydrogen, right? Oh, plutonium. Think of the disaster that weapons of water will unleash if we don't use the weapons of earth, our mind, to absorb that water and refuse to go to war. Oh boy. 就是说，有一个武器展览，在我长大的时候，我10岁的时候，这个故事我要讲扼要，因为时间过得好快啊。那个大家都会就差不多听得懂。就说在美国中部呢，我爸爸就每年就带我到那个武器展览，那个武器展览有一代一代所有人类用过的武器，就可以看到从那个最早的一个木头棍子，一直到一个原子弹 decommissioned 不能爆发的一个原子弹，中间所有的一代一代的一国一国的一时用的都在那儿看的。还有很多桌子是那个做买卖的，要卖武器卖枪的就买枪的都在那儿看的。然后呢，我拿出来一个那个日本那个 samurai 那个武士的这个宝剑，我拿出来，我看到我眼睛在那个剑的刃上看到我影子了，我的眼睛一拿出来了，小了，我变成准备刷那个剑啊。那么在我右手边，我看到一个人站在那儿，他拿出来一个枪，那把枪是向我父亲来准备放。哦，我一看到了，马上在我心里有个改变变换，什么呢？我都准备用那个剑打他的头。为什么呢？他威胁我父亲，他变成敌人，一战了眼睛，哇！就是一念间，我就准备，我变成武士，10岁的孩子，什么都不懂，我就准备这样子，因为他会打我父亲了。然后怎么样呢？我爸爸就看他一眼，就说：“哎 ，Ted， 你来了啊？我们在停车场那儿等你呢啊。”原来是我父亲的朋友。哦，我觉得好，就说没意思哈，失礼哈。我准备要打我爸爸的朋友了，为什么呢？因为我手里拿那个可以打的那个武器，就是这个，变得那么快，然后又变回来了。我就那个时候太年轻，我不懂什么道理。不过等我到了金山寺之后，看到上人写的这个那个佛祖道引那本书，就里边水晶回天录，就是水晶回天录，讲那个 cycle of weapons， 就是用五行性来解释武器。本来是土做的这个武器就是拳头啊，还有脚。然后呢，因为木克土，所以呢就有一个棍子，棍子你可以打，无论你的脚怎么快呢，我有棍子把你打倒了。可是呢，又有一个人发明那个金的武器了，什么一个剑，那个弓箭的箭，就射一个箭呐，那个打棍子的那个人呢倒了所以呢就说金克木然后呢你们懂的哈，然后有火火克金就是那个火花一些枪什么的。然后呢就说现在呢最可怕的是什么？
就是属于水的武器。属于水的武器是什么武器呢？就是原子弹、核子弹，还有那个化学的武器，真的可怕。不过商人写那个论文，那篇的那个文章写得很好，他又把它回来了。怎么说呢？就说从土出发，又回来土，怎么样？人的心呢，如果发心不争，那这个土克水，吸收那个水，我们不杀，把战争平息，那就是这个土的武器到极点，这个圆满的地步。所以呢，还是归于一念心。就像我在那个gun show啊，一念间就是敌人，愿意杀，准备杀；一念间又变成朋友了，那何必了？我们人类奇怪哈，我们都可以杀戮我们自己的这个品性，这个种族，其他的动物都不会这样子，奇怪。So okay, now think about those hands in the gun show. Every single one, every one of those weapons, wait for a human hand to reach down, pick it up, and use it. Swing the club, slice with a sword, pull the trigger, shoot the arrow, push the button, or refuse to do that. And stop killing. Find another way to resolve difference and conflict. So think of all the hands of the men and now the women who have picked up those weapons and gone to war. Of all the ones who actually took them out into combat, half of them dropped the weapon and died. The other victorious half, swung it again, lived to fight another day. How interesting. Brown hands, pink hands, golden hands, black hands, red hands, swinging those weapons, pushing those buttons, pulling those triggers. However many pick them up, those that used it less skillfully drop the weapon back to earth from a lifeless fingers. So each successive stage in war's technology, it took human hands to realize the destruction latent in the weapons. Looking deeper, I saw how the power to kill of that samurai sword in my hand came from a thought of hatred and fighting in my mind. The first step in that process was a thought of fighting an enemy. So I witnessed in this polished blade of that samurai sword my mind's ability to turn a human being into an enemy in the movement of a thought. 有多少手拿起来武器准备去打仗呢？战完了一半都会把那个武器放下去，因为死了啊！你不能用呢，你会放下。那个五星星的武器的那个言论的话，都是每一步呢，就需要人的手把那个杀人的那个能力实现了，那么那个手呢，都是等一念心。我看到那个 samurai sword， 它的这个很滑的、很亮的一个 blade， 我看到我自己的眼睛，把一个人成一个敌人。就在一念心。So how powerful is the human mind to set off a chain of hatred that leads to the end of life? How powerful. Throughout history, it only takes a spark from the mind to raise that army of hands. And I looked at my own hands and I flexed them. And I tried to imagine those hands lifeless. Right? You can do that right where you're sitting. You just, there you go. I want to move it, moves. Imagine it unable because it's dead. It becomes earth again. That summer, the summer of my 10th to 11th year, even though I couldn't process it at this level, I had to get to Gold Mountain before I saw the cycle. I gradually lost interest in weapons. The idea that my mind was really what was going on was kind of scary for a kid, and also because I didn't have the perspective, but I knew there was something there. So I decided that I wanted to learn about the mind at that point. And then 14 years later in a Buddhist monastery, I was on retreat for the first time. I was still a grad student, and I saw Guanyin Bodhisattva. I saw actually not this image, I saw the other Guanyin that was at Gold Mountain Monastery. Now it's up in Vancouver at Gold Buddha. It's a seated 1,000-hand Guanyin. It's a beautiful, wonderful image. Guanyin Bodhisattva, contemplator of the sounds of the world, a representation of great compassion. Guanyin appears mostly feminine, mostly female and nurturing, remarkably like the Blessed Virgin holding the baby Jesus, sometimes more masculine. The image that I saw was a Guanyin with 1,000 hands, each with 1,000 arms, each with a hand set in the arm and an eye in each hand. The ears you have to kind of imply. And each hand and eye were prepared to support and to rescue anybody who called on Guanyin's name. No questions. Waiting to be called on. The sight of Guanyin's hands brought back to mind the gun show, but with a difference. Thoughts make enemies out of family. Guanyin's compassion turns strangers into family, even across species boundaries. So I didn't know at the time, but I investigated. Here was Guanyin. The thing that made those hands emerge were vows. The image was a symbol. It's just an image. But it's an ordinary person who looked first within himself, herself, and then awoke to their deepest nature, went through the superficial differences, the skin differences, and saw that every human, every creature, every being shares a common elemental makeup. The element earth makes up all our bodies. The element air fills all our lungs and pores, inspires our hearts alike. The element water purifies all blood, and the element fire transforms and purifies as well. Makes transformation. There's one substance united through these four elements. And I have to believe that everybody yearns towards peace and happiness. So Guanyin Bodhisattva saw that sameness, that kinness, that family, and made vows to transform that suffering that we heard about today from Ajahn Sumedho, and the great compassion that gives joy equally. So Guanyin witnessed that once past that ego, well-being was dependent on all well-being. Guanyin, it's kind of you could say great compassion is a little bit of a trap, maybe, if you think of it in those terms, because why? Once you see the connection, you can't be satisfied with small peace of mind. You're not satisfied until everyone shares that. So, but I think at that point, probably, I'm supposing what it must be like. At that point, you have the strength to make that peace of mind for everyone your goal. You can realize it. Because Guanyin, at that point, identifies everyone as extended family. There's a Avatamsaka quote that I really like. It goes, "The Bodhisattva, the awakened being, protects and dedicates his, her merit to those who are not family and friends equally, as he does to family and friends without distinction." And why? This awakened being, and by extension, anybody who's into the sutra, this awakened being has entered into the uniform and unprejudiced nature of all things. She has no thought of any living being not being family and friends. So at that point, when I saw that in that retreat, very much like our retreat today, I was at Gold Mountain at the time, and it was a summer retreat, and that was my first time in the monastery. Seeing that image of Guanyin Bodhisattva, I recalled the gun show, and I thought, man, if my mind can make enemies out of strangers, I wonder if my mind could make family out of people I see connected to me. One way I began was by making a vow not to eat their bodies, to get the nutrition that I needed from something that didn't involve killing. That was a start. And not easy, but if you think about it, that's available. That's available vow power that makes a difference immediately. We're in this state, California. Some of us have come from Chicago. Some of us have come from Singapore. Some have come from Canada, all over to be here. And while we're in California, nobody starves eating vegetables, right? Plenty of vegetables. Back where I grew up in Ohio in the winter, broccoli came 4 days from California, and it was wrapped in this little white plastic tray with cellophane. It looked terrible. We didn't have vegetables in the winter in Ohio that much. Potatoes, whatever you could put into cans and jars. But here in California, we're doing good for non-meat sources. So I don't have to preach that. You all get that. So that would be one thing to do while you're here, maybe, would be to see how you feel after a week of eating vegetables. And then at the end of the week, check it out. How's your energy? You will have spent a week, unless you're sneaking over to Ukiah to you know, McDonald's. Now, in that case, you kind of mess up the test sample, don't you? But experiment. Think it over. How do you feel after a week of powered by vegetables? If you really are doing it, you may have the strength of elephants who are not powered by Big Macs. You may have the strength of horses who never eat beefsteak. You may have the strength of gazelles, the speed of a gazelle. Or Adrius Feininger, the Olympic weightlifter who is a complete vegan, right? So I hope so. That's one way to put these principles into practice. I need to translate, and I'm going to come down and talk to you all. So, 就说等我这个再过14年，我在金山寺参加，就像你们各位今年参加的这个佛期观音期，我看到42手眼的这个观音菩萨像，千手千眼观音菩萨像，不是这一尊。是在金佛寺那个温哥华，以前在金山寺，我看到了，我就说哦，你看，观音菩萨都把一切众生成一个家庭，啊，那么我呢，我拿起来武器呢，就把这个眼前这个人当一个敌人，那个心呢，多么可怕！所以呢，我就虽然10岁不懂那个道理，也看不到那个循环，可是14年后，我就准备更深了解我在那个gun show那个时候这个经验所以我们信佛的人呢，就能明白这个道理那么就知道这个同体大悲是这个人间呢最高无上的一个成就这不是小事情我们真正能把这个不害ahimsa不杀生这个道理就在心地上能把它种下坚固的永久的种子呢，那就实现的时候我们都会变成观音菩萨的一只手那么在什么地方开始呢？就看我们的饮食如果我们真的愿意行一种不害的生活，那我们不会吃众生肉。在加州呢，就吃蔬菜都很好，很好，不缺了所以这是简单翻译那么我现在下来准备跟大家就讨论这个打观音期一些问题。Okay, what I had in mind was if I come down, and sit, I would like to give people a chance to ask direct questions about the stuff that you'd like to know about the Guanyin Bodhisattva session. Doug Powers is done this year after year. He's really, really good at this. But tonight, I thought since everybody's here in the Buddha Hall and you know, I'm here, I could also contribute. And the things that I can't answer, Doug can surely answer. So if I don't satisfy you, write it down and you can ask it tomorrow night. All right. One 175. 175. This is a wonderful Guanyin Bodhisattva praise that I don't hear often enough here. We get going in our Chinese liturgy, which has wonderful praises, and we never seem to kind of get around to this Guanyin praise, and I wanted people to know it's here, because that's why it's printed in our book. By golly, it's already here. And it's a great song. Let's take a look at the lyrics. For the lyrics, you need to turn to, let's see, turn to page 173. Turn over one more. Bodhisattva, Guan Shiyin, is wonderful past gratitude. Pure and clear are her adornments, meaning her appearance. Gained through practice, ages long. Guanyin Bodhisattva says the story was a Buddha in past lives. That's how they say. And she saw that living beings were still suffering, and so she made a resolve to come back as a Bodhisattva to continue working. And all of the practice that she was doing and the vows that she made gave her a beautiful appearance. Very harmonious. Sea vast, a red lotus flower, fragrant, rests beneath her foot. Guanyin often appears with a lotus, the symbol of compassion. Turn over to page 174. Bay curve of an autumn moon is in the crescent of her brows. Guanyin often appears in the autumn, and there's often a kind of a, what do you say, a very, nostalgia is not the word, bittersweet is the word, a bittersweet quality of Guanyin, because her business is ending suffering when you call her name. And how often does she hear those names? All the time. And what does she meet when she hears it? Suffering. So Guanyin is like, could quit because you just say, too much, I can't handle it. But her vows don't let her. So there's that bittersweet autumn quality. You know, when the days are getting shorter, that same feeling. In the crescent of her brows. Everywhere and constantly, sweet dew sprinkles from her vase. One of Guanyin Bodhisattva's images is the Bodhisattva, the gentle-looking woman with the white robe, and she's holding a vase in her hand, sprinkling sweet dew. And there are many, many stories about Guanyin Bodhisattva's function. When you call her name, Namo Guan Shiyin Pusa, Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva, or if the car is just about to hit the cliff, you go, Guanyin Pusa. You don't say, greatly compassionate being who hears the sounds of the world, awakened one. Too late. You've already hit the cliff, right? Car is over the edge. Guanyin Pusa, you know, however you do it long or short. But that Guanyin, the name is the power, right? In her hand, the willow branch, through the countless autumns, Guanyin sprinkles that sweet dew. And people, in my hearing, have told stories about calling that name and feeling this coolness. Remarkable. Strangers I sing a song about Guanyin called She Carries Me. And I've had, you know, people in the audience come up afterwards and say, I'm a Catholic, but I met Guanyin Pusa. Let me tell you the story. And my sister-in-law had cancer, and we were just, you know, and she felt this coolness and recovery and peace of mind. So, prayers depart 1,000 hearts. In 1,000 hearts, she answers. People call on Guanyin Bodhisattva's name. The Universal Door chapter that we recite, the Pumanpin, is full of stories about people who say, Namo Guanyin Pusa. And all the situations when you would need that help, when you need a hand, now. And you recite Guanyin's name, and that hand comes forward. In 1,000 hearts, she answers. And as we heard tonight, remember the first quote that I read? It's about fear. Fear and courage, and fearless courage. So a lot of the time, Guanyin's response is not drops of sweet dew or a woman in white coming to give you a hand, but the action happens in your heart. You're afraid. You're terrified. You're despairing. And you call in Guanyin's name, something changes. Don't believe it. You can be smarter than me. I hope you are. But I've had that experience of being in a situation of imminent danger, and the only thing that I had to depend on, Guanyin Bodhisattva's name, and it was plenty. It was enough. What changed was my own perception of the situation and a sense of connection. And I saw the danger coming to me as just confused energy. And I was able to find my way through it, and it just melted. That's in 1,000 hearts, she answers, right? Sailing the sea of suffering, crossing people over. And then this wonderful refrain, Namo, greatly kind and compassionate, Bodhisattva of the crystal land, who dwells on Potola Mountain and who observes the sounds of the world. We do that 3 times. So Namo means I return to. Ajahn Sumedho talked about refuge, right? And Namo means I take refuge. I find my strength. I find safety in whoever you're Namoing, right? So Namo Guanyin Pusa. Okay, so that's the text. Let's do the melody. It's such a pretty melody. The author of this is our very own David Rounds, our Dharma brother, Guadao, who wrote this years and years ago, and he even forgot that he wrote it. We were at Buddha Root Farm 2 days ago, and I was praising this song. And I said, David, you wrote this. He said, sing it a little bit. So I sang it. Yeah, I guess I did. He said, I did write that song. So, okay, so here's the, I'll give you the pitch. Anybody who can, jump right in. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Bodhisattva Guan Shi in his wonderful past gratitude. Pure and clear are her adornments gained through practice ages long. Let me raise the pitch a little bit. See vast red lotus flower, fragrant rest beneath her foot. Baker of an autumn moon is in the crescent of her brows. Everywhere and constantly Sweet dew sprinkles from her vase. In her hand a willow branch, through the countless autumns. Prayers depart 1,000 hearts, in 1,000 hearts she answers. Sailing the sea of suffering, crossing people over. Namo, greatly kind and compassionate Bodhisattva of the crystal land, who dwells on Potola mountain and observes the sounds of the world. Again, Namo, greatly kind and compassionate Bodhisattva of the crystal land, who dwells on Potola mountain and observes the sounds of the world. One more. Namo, greatly kind and compassionate Bodhisattva of the crystal land, who dwells on Potola mountain and observes sounds of the world. And then it's ready for you to go, Namo Guan Yin Pusana. Right? It goes right into Guanyin's name. Isn't that a lovely song? That was hiding right there in the book all this time, waiting for, it's all printed, ready to go with the pool, right? With the score. So I really want to let people know that that song is there and available, ready to be brought out, because I think it's got a spirit. It's got a Guanyin Pusa spirit, especially very, very nice. So when you see David, you can thank him. So for giving birth to that vessel for Guanyin Bodhisattva's compassion. All right, just that's all I wanted you to know was about that song. So who's got a question or a comment about Guanyin Bodhisattva practice? Devotional Buddhism. Devotional Buddhism. Different from Chan at the outside. It leads to the same place. But it's very different. A lot of people come to Buddhism and don't know that we do devotion. Said Zhivu. Kevin's kind of like, I don't know if I dare ask it. There's a lot of people in this room, man. Yeah, Kevin. Where does she get, why does she have so many arms? And where, so one more time, where does? There's one important word I'm not hearing. 1,000 arms from. Where does Guanyin Bodhisattva get her 1,000 arms from? The short answer is Guanyin Bodhisattva gets her 1,000 arms from her vows. And where do the vows come from? They come from her heart. So the way I understand it, and I am not an expert, and you'd have to ask Guanyin to get the real story. But what I understand is Guanyin herself has her ears open, and she hears cries. She hears the sounds that people make, not just people. Imagine the sounds outside a slaughterhouse. You ever hear pigs when they're slaughtered? They sound just like babies, humans. She heard that, and she thought, I gotta help. I got to help. I can't just have it go through my ears and not do something. So she said, I'm determined to help. And the hands could, and the arms could just be like an artistic depiction of that wish to help. Or they could be real. I know when people call, they kind of experience a hand coming out of nowhere and help arrives. But I think the arms, the way I look at them is they are Guanyin's vows to help made into human form. 他的问题说观音菩萨到底这个前手从哪里来？我说最好你要问观音菩萨，我不是专家，不是我的境界。不过如果需要答复的话，我都觉得那个1000个手背呢，都是从观音菩萨的愿力而来。观音菩萨的愿力从哪里来？就是从他的心来。什么心呢？观音菩萨本来他的耳朵就开了。他会听到众生的声音，所谓顺声救苦，对不对？那众生的声音是什么声音呢？应该说一半是苦，一半是乐，都有乐的声音出来了。不过呢，久而久之，它都会变成苦。就说那个屠宰场旁边是什么声音？从台湾来的人都知道杀猪的声音呢。哦。就一把大的刀刺他，那个猪啊，杀他的时候，他的声音就像人的孩子，啊。观音菩萨听到了，他忍不住，他说：“我必须要想法子了苦，必须要想法子救他们呢。”所以他那个心呢，实现的时候。就变成好像手背，可能那个手背是真真实实的，不过呢，你不想是真实，你就说那就是观音菩萨那么多心愿，就有形象，有一个手背，这么答复。Okay, thank you, Kevin. See that one so bad? Good question. Don't all ask at once. Guanyin Pusa has 1,000 hands, and I don't even see one hand. You guys are all clear on Guanyin Pusa practice. Okay, good for you. This is going to be a great session. Yes, sir, in the back. Which one? Thank you. That's great. Yeah, I thought that too. What is your name, sir? Robert. Robert's comment was that he wanted to draw a connection between other manifestations of compassion, such as Catholic social service, for example, or, let me fill in the blanks, Guanyin, or the Blessed Virgin, and that sense of compassion that is very much alive in the Roman Catholic world. Further, what he witnesses in Siji Gongde Hui in Taiwan, and all of the incredible deeds that the disciples of Master Zhengyan have done throughout the world in mercy, using that word, merciful rescue and compassion. So I would underscore that and say my thought on it is, if no matter whether the Blessed Virgin came first or Guanyin came first, it's really not important. It doesn't have to be in a linear timeline. If Guanyin and the Blessed Virgin and Siji didn't exist, we would have to invent them. And when we invent them, that's what they look like, right? 他说不是单单大乘佛法都有这些慈悲的表现，这个天主教都有玛利亚圣母啊，台湾有慈济功德会，我说完全同意了。如果没有这些大慈悲的表现，我们人必须要发明，必须要创造这些表现，都会有观音菩萨的样子。不需要问谁先谁后。Okay, time for one more or 100. Who cares? Let's just ask. Yes, ma'am. Okay, Angela's question was about the value of reciting Guanyin's name. And that's, anybody who is here to do this session will be doing that a lot. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa is the Chinese way. Pusa is Chinese word. Guan Shi Yin is actually Sanskrit, Avalokiteshvara. So how do you recite it? Just use your language. If we say Guanyin Bodhisattva, that's half Chinese, half Sanskrit. And Sanskrit becomes English. Guanyin's vows expressed in the sutras say, there she was, feeling a need to help, and she said, here's the way. Call my name. Anybody who calls my name, I'll help you. I'll solve your problem. And then in the Pumantian, the universal door, there's a list of how Guanyin's planning to do that. From rescues to delivering babies to the childless who want them, to clearing up your mind if you find yourself full of anger or desire. All those are involved in Guanyin's vows. So the value of reciting the name is right there. There's a promise. Guanyin says, you need help, recite my name. That's the cause, I'll give the response. If you don't recite, you didn't make the phone call, right? Guanyin didn't pick up her cell phone because you didn't call. So you call and Guanyin responds. Angela went on to say, she gets the response, and she personally has had that experience. But then you don't recite anymore. What then? Does it still work? Well, sure. But what if you kind of wait until the crisis before you recite? What if you're in a coma? What if you forget? Is it Shiguan Sapu? Shiguan Sapu! And that's not it. Guanyin Pusa. Oh, that's it. So, does it work? Well, why mess around? Why not go through the front door? People are funny. There's a highway waiting for us to walk, and we love the bypass. We don't walk the highway. We take the side road and get lost in the ditch. We could have taken the highway. We're Americans. We like to, do it our way. Well, there's the way. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. How do you do it? Well, I do it with a melody. I play the mandolin. It sounds really good on the mandolin. So I play it on the mandolin and it sticks in my ear. Do you play piano? Play it on the keyboard. Dee, 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 dee. It's all in the white keys. Or move to the black. It's all in the black keys. It's pentatonic. So you can make it a blues. You can make it Celtic. You can do whatever you want with it. The melody helps. You don't need the melody. You don't like the melody? Namo Guanyin Pusa. Guanyin Pusa, Guanyin Pusa, Guanyin Pusa, Guanyin Pusa. So there are a lot of ways to access these dharmas. In fact, if you recite the Pumanpin, if you recite the Great Compassion Mantra, if you recite Guanyin Bodhisattva's vows, all of those are ways to access Guanyin Pusa's saving power. So that's the way. If you do it regularly, when the time comes, you'll remember. Because why? You grooved it. You grooved it in. It's a habit. Habits show up when we need them. If you wait, you might remember, you might not. Why gamble? Go down that road. You'll be glad you did, because where you get there, where you get is Guanyin Pusa comes into your heart, and you become one of Guanyin Bodhisattva's hands and eyes. 所以我就说你要多多念。你如果等到需要的时候才记得念，你有可能念不出来，或者你念错了你自己就慌张啊，或者麻木啊，这个失去清醒呢。不要赌博啊！我们人很奇怪，有一个广大的道路我们不走，我们喜欢那个山径，弯弯曲曲的，奇怪。所以呢，我们还是多多老老实实的南无观音菩萨。你愿意用音乐就用音乐，你不上你就上念就念嘛，大悲咒也可以啊，那个普门品都可以，都是观音菩萨的大悲法。Okay, so the time has come, and you all have work to do still. So tomorrow, the folks who are here for the first time and who are learning with each other about how to recite, please get those questions and ask Doug and ask each other, and then spend more time in the hall. Check it out yourself. Guanyin Pusa's vows include every one of us. 就说新来的人呢，要第一次研究这个观音气的人，一定要问，尽量问 Doug Powers 问你同学、你的同山道友，那么最好就多多在大殿里边参加这个法会，观音菩萨的愿力也属于我们。阿弥陀佛。Now we're going to use the English language transference of merit to transfer merit tonight. The important thing about transference is that you actually do it in your mind. The transference is interactive. You take all the goodness that comes from being here, however much cultivation you want to share, and you send it out with a wish. I transfer the merit to whom? Who do you transfer to? With the wish that. Fill in the blank. So you share it with the world using your mind like a radio beacon, and you send it out to whomever needs that merit. Give it all away. It just all comes back. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master.